Thursday, everyone. Welcome aboard to a new session of charting across the board. As you guys know, everything happened because of what people believe, and everyone has different idea of what's high and what's low. This is what Mark Douglas suggests in his book. All price movement is based on people's belief about what is going to happen when in the future. Here, what we do is simple. When the set of criteria is present in the market, there is simply a higher probability than not putting the edge in our favor. Today, perception of market information. Where are we in the price action for BTC? As you guys can observe, we are trading currently at 100,011 and change. As you guys know, it's always important to bring context. How did we get here? Where do we go next? As we're approaching the next intersection between price and time expected for October the 3rd. To give a brief recap, and also before jumping straight into the TA, I would like to thank everyone for the new 2,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. I wasn't expecting this rapid move. However, it has been an extremely amount of new people coming in, joining, asking for advice, which none of these represent any financial advice. What we do here is present the technicals based on the titans of the past, the market technicians from the 1930s and 40s. Okay? And of course, our readings is based on our interpretation, once again, of the market information. Whether you can use this as your own approach, it is up to you. None of these constitutes any financial advice. To bring a recap on the price action for Bitcoin, once again, you guys know we were finding support previously during September lows at 107, 108. That was a projected zone from the previous all-time high at 124. We had that projection from the highs to the lows. And of course, you guys can revisit all the previous analysis. Everything is posted in the chat or in the YouTube video, as well as the Discord room where we keep updating all the levels by levels. Here, previously a pending variation of an information for a cipher during the mid-August, okay? That was during the peak at the 0.886 with an overspill of the 1.13 towards 124, making later a projection from the 124, 123,000 towards the 108, 107 overspill, okay? What occurred indeed during the cycle low was respected at those levels. Since then, we presented other arguments within the room also, where after testing the PRC, the potential reversal zone of this variation of an information, we favor the longs at these lows, giving the extreme undervalue conditions, oversold conditions on the daily time frame. Here, you guys can observe the big fix based on the sentiment indicator also, when the histogram island present a higher reading in green that indicates oftentimes a lower risk areas that indeed manifested at 108 and 107 prior to the jump towards 115 and 117. Okay, once we reach the PRC, the potential reversal zone at these levels on the daily time frame, okay, projection mid-August, later October manifested at the lows. Also, it is important to know here the cyclical or the cycle bracket. Okay, this implies the highs and the lows. The midpoints once again indicates the highs and lows based on cycles. One of the readings based on cyclical rhythm. Okay. After testing the 108, 107 region, what we did here in our room, we zoom into the hourly time frame, okay? This one was also presented within the room for an M formation. Here we can observe those levels in details, but we zoom into the hourly, there was indeed an argument for an M formation as long as the 0.886 was not completely violated. We tested those levels at 107 prior to heading towards the 0.618 and the 0.50. In the same time, you can observe the same projection. We printed the variation of an information. We then zoom into the hourly. There was a Gartley. From there on, we made projection towards the upside from the same pattern. Here also, there was an interpretation of an inverse head and shoulders. An early identification structure previously also presented at 110 with projection towards 119. We fell shy of those levels from this variation or from these head and shoulder patterns, inverse head and shoulder patterns, indeed reversing and testing the 118 in some exchanges. Okay, that was also within the realm of probabilities, where here's the structure also presented within the room. All of these details are presented there in advance prior to these patterns unfolding. Okay, and now of course, as I mentioned, we fell shy of this measure move of the structure. Once again, a pattern based on the 4-hour time frame. As you guys know, we have been moving into the daily, the major pattern, okay, from the 124 towards the completion point at 107, 108, completed. We then reach the intermediate cycle high expected for first cycle low, okay, September the 3rd, the early month, then a cycle high within the intersection between price and time for the 0.618 for September the 16th. Okay, and of course 2 days later we have a drawdown after rejecting where at the 0.886, also within the range for resistance levels. However, new information. Where are we currently with the price action for BTC? Let's jump now briefly into the main information. As you guys can observe, 107 is now a key level for the bulls to defend, okay? And therefore, as these targets were indeed reached, the 0.50 and the 0.618, okay? These levels highlighted here. We then know that these were key technical level for the 0.618 to breach higher and potentially test the upper boundary of what appears an early formation of a right angle and descending broadening pattern. As of now, only an interpretation as long as we remain within the 107 as support, okay? Because also in the same manner, you guys can already observe here that this previous test can be interpreted as type 1. Okay, type 1 is the first reactive move of any harmonic structure. Clearly, we have the type 1. Okay, type 1 indeed manifested from 107, 108 was indeed the main level. As you guys can observe here, this 0.618 comes from the previous low at 98,000 to the highs of 124. The midpoint in between support was indeed founded prior to creating another upward advance of nearly 10%. Okay, minor move. However, are we going to now print another type 2 return? Okay, both arguments are here present for either the bears and the bulls. In the case of the bulls, we can observe that the market structure on the daily hasn't been violated. There is no shift in the market sequence of higher lows, okay? Until, of course, this low at 107 is completely violated, okay? We got the lows at 98,000, a higher low, okay, at 107, currently still another higher low until further selling pressure dictates otherwise and we head much lower. Okay, So therefore, 107 becomes a key support level for the bulls. For the bears, there's also an argument for a precursor of a bearish 5-0, which was indeed this pattern. This one represents a cipher, bullish cipher, or also a bullish shark as a PRC, the potential reversal zone, when lower, okay, to the 0.886. Indeed, both arguments are valid. However, type 1 or bearish 5-0. A bearish 5-0, for those unfamiliar, to repeat over and over, is a continuation structure, meaning that if prices are unable to breach higher than the 0.50% or the 0.618 from the previous high to the lows, if this zone remains as resistance, then the bears may have an argument for indeed a continuation towards the downside. However, the bulls must defend the 107. That has been the case so far. There is potentially another M formation here. If we zoom into the 4-hour time frame, you guys can already observe, if you are a harmonic pattern trader, there might be an argument for an M formation based on the 4-hour as well as the hourly time frame. Okay, and as you guys can observe, zooming into the 4-hour time frame, this cyclical rhythm, the cycle brackets are indeed being respected. The cycle low, then we have the cycle high, and heading now into when? October. There is an intersection between price and time expected for October the 3rd based on the application of Fibonacci analysis using or utilizing the 1.618, the golden ratio, as the next significant data point. Okay, I'm going to show those levels and how to compute this ratio as we are indeed navigating into the new month for the cycle in October. Can that be a cycle low? Potentially. Why? Because if we compute the daily time frame once again, how did we come with the number 3rd on October? Computing the previous peaks, okay, the A and C legs here, the data points, we have the distance between these two peaks. From A to B, we have 31 days. Multiplying 31 days by 1.618, it gives us a number of, you guys allow me 1 second here, I'm going to do a quick math here. 31 times 1.618 give us a number of 50. Therefore, the next cycle low, ideally, as long as not breaking below the previous low, and even if we break below the previous low at 107, there might be an argument for a cycle low. Multiplying or computing once again the distance between A and B, the two previous peaks, multiplying once again the distance times 1.618, give us a range or a date for 50 days. Therefore, from the previous peak, we compute 50 days. Okay, you can observe here the numbers in between, where 50 comes for October the 3rd, right here, 50 days, applying the bars, the distance between the previous peak to the potential new cycle low, expected for Friday the 3rd. Okay, within this particular time interval, the daily time frame, this can only be perceived as an intermediate cycle low before, of course, the major projection towards the major lows, 90s, mid 80s. Okay, however, we have been moving accordingly, levels by levels. Why? To remove any preconceived biases. Okay, why? Because previously also at the highs, we could expect higher, but the technicals were suggesting a potential low. In a similar context, early this month, in September, we have a cycle low, then a cycle high, now potentially another cycle low. And if that's the case, depending on which way or which directional trend continues, either upwards or downwards, you guys can already compute here a potential M formation. If Bitcoin head lower, okay, that wouldn't be a harmonic structure given the B point at 1 not necessarily 1.618. We compute the proper ratio from the lows back to the highs. Ideally, a 0.618. We can be permissive here, given that crypto is a pretty volatile market. So therefore, it will break below the B point only if, okay, only if Bitcoin pierces below 108. One can argue that yes, we may go lower towards the 0.786 at 103 or the 0.886 pretty much at 100,000 key psychological level. However, that is not the case so far, as we're moving accordingly based on the new information that we perceive in the chart. The daily time frame printed a low. Therefore, this low can still be computed as another higher low than the previous low, okay? And of course, another interpretation will be from the highs to the lows, back to the highs, depending on the support levels, as long as, okay, as long as prices are not breaching below the 0.886 at 107, one can argue that this may be another another Gartley pattern or a deep Gartley towards the 0.886 in this manner. Support depending if, okay? Another support levels, 111 is a key support as of now, as a higher low. 110, 111, I would say, is a key support based on these levels, okay? Then, of course, the upward traction at the 0.786, the 0.886 will be pretty much in contact here with the previous upper trend line. This, of course, is a new information. However, for those of you who are following or have been following our work within the room, previously also we presented a pending variation of a W for what was previously interpreted as a cipher pattern, okay? If I look at those levels, I am pretty sure I do have those levels for, I believe it was a cipher in this manner. The major one on the daily, this one, I believe. No, that would be the new pending information. Where is my cipher pattern here? To be safe, right here, this one. This one was a previously projected zone from the lows, okay? At 107, that was, or 111, that was the previous C leg of the move. And if prices navigate higher, we then have the argument for the completion point at the 0.786, okay? Will be pretty much 121. Of course, we're heading towards that direction, okay? That was potentially the case. However, now we have new information. And the new information, of course, are computing those discernible highs, discernible lows, discernible highs, potentially discernible low, as long as, once again, I want to make this very clear, we're not breaking below the 0.618 at 108, okay? Basically, the market structure on the daily has not changed. There's no need for me to project or to make low projections until the data dictates otherwise. We do know, we are aware that on the weekly, we have our major pending cipher, okay, towards the 80s, but as we have been moving accordingly since pretty much the previous high also, we make clear that there might be the stepping stones depending on each levels, which one define as support and resistance. Therefore, the next cycle low potentially continues to be respected or respected later if that manifests in the expected manner, but projected for October the 3rd, coming into confluence here with the brackets on October the 1st, okay? Therefore, key levels, once again, I would like to make clear that as long as we're not breaking below 107, we then have potential argument towards the higher levels, okay? And this can be interpreted indeed as another higher low than the previous low, respecting the market structure based, once again, on the daily time frame, okay? Potentially maybe now turning into another. You can observe this pattern here. You let me know in the comments. Everyone, thank you for being here. If you find this information useful, you guys know where to find us. By the way, as we have partnered with Apex, you guys can use our link in the description below for this presentation, as they are promoting a room. Therefore, all evals are currently 80% discount. Okay, more information on the video below, and I'll see you guys on the next one. And remember to live a life with an attitude of gratitude. We'll do another stream for the equities market, also finding some turbulences in between. I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.